But really the goal for this series is to come together, exchange that information, brush up on some skills, and really reflect on the impact that each one of us can have in our workplace and on our teams and in the services we provide to the residents of Lincoln and Lancaster County. So for today's session, this is build and maintain a culture of accountability. Build and maintain. So in other words, this is not something you check the box on and then you're done, you're good, you don't worry about any of this ever again. But the key is to, yes, build and then maintain, constantly maintain, and we'll dive into that here shortly, that culture of accountability. And when we really examine and think about the workplace, we have teammates from all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different subject matter experts and different topics, different experiences. So we really have a diverse team here at the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And when we talk about coming together and creating a workplace where each one of us feels like we can belong, one of the foundations to that will be accountability. The accountability that we have as individuals and the accountability that each one of us can work to strengthen on our respective teams. So hopefully if you're listening to today's training, you are at your computer, you have access to the chat function. And it's okay if you're just listening and you're otherwise maybe working on a different thing, I get that. But for those who do have access to the chat function, I invite you to utilize that throughout today's session. Any questions you might have, any comments, any additional insights, if you want me to revisit anything, please keep that chat function going. This is an interactive session. Even though we can't all be together in person, we really do value the engagement and the insights and the expertise that you all bring to today's session. So, culture of accountability. My name is RJ Vega. I am the Culture and Organizational Development Manager here at Human Resources. We serve both the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County, and I'm joined by Christy Hernandez, Learning and Organizational Development Division Manager here at HR. And shout out to Christy for keeping the technology running, and if there's any sort of snafus that come up, she will be on it. As well as monitoring the chat. So shout out to Christy. Thanks for all the help in today's session. So onward and upward to what the heck are we going to talk about today? Accountability. What is that? Let's dive deep into what that truly means. We'll talk about the culture of accountability. Where does all that begin? And then how can we identify keys, strategies, insights to strengthen the sense of accountability that we have? We'll close things up and hold some space for any questions or additional comments that you all might have at the tail end of today's agenda. But again, feel free to utilize the chat function as we are going through the session today. All right. Let's get this party started here. And I'm going to focus us on the chat function again. So I want to hear from you all and get a sense of the knowledge that we have when we walk into today's virtual session. So in the chat, can you respond to this? To me, accountability means what? What does accountability mean to you? In your words, through the chat function. I'll hold a few moments here to let you type out your responses. To me, accountability means what? Okay, see some answers starting to come through the chat there. Being responsible for, love that. Ability to set a goal and achieve it. Taking ownership of your actions. Okay, Becca. Yep, owning your decisions. Hey, Angel, good. Very good. Doing what I say, I'll do. Okay. Authenticity, follow up, follow through. Love it. Responsible. Admitting when you mess up. Well, what happens when we never mess up? No. Yes, it's true. When we mess up, the importance of admitting that. Remedying the situation, working to repair. Excellent. Yeah, keep those responses going because each one of us has a certain familiarity with that concept, accountability. We we know a little bit more or less what it is, how it has impacted us in the workplace, in our lives outside of the workplace. So to go a layer deeper here in accountability and to add to what's already been said in the chat and what's continuing to be sent through the chat is that the results of a given task and the sense of ownership over that. So yes, we have a responsibility to carry out whatever our roles, projects are, the goals that we have. That's our responsibility. And in addition to that, emphasizing the sense of ownership that we have over that. So to give you an example here, I might be responsible for today's uh, designing today's training. So I'll work on the PowerPoint slides. I'll create that. I'll think through the different content and ways to get some conversation going for us. And that's my responsibility. But to go a layer deeper here and really reflect on accountability, I'm accountable for making sure that today's training is a meaningful and helpful learning experience for all of us here at the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County. So is this an effective use of our time and our capacity as we reflect on accountability and think of ways to implement that into ourselves as professionals and the teams that we belong to? So again, responsibility and accountability, there's a lot of overlap there. It goes hand in hand, but really with accountability, it's that sense of ownership, like you all laid out in the chat there today. So building and maintaining a culture of accountability. Well, what do we mean when we say culture? So again, going back to that chat function, I want to hear from you all. What does workplace culture mean to you? What comes to mind when you hear that phrase, workplace culture? Give you a few moments to type out your responses in the chat. What does workplace culture mean to you? Yeah, workplace culture. It's going to be a little tougher when you sit down and think through it. Expectations, the tone, consistency. Love it, Hannah. Yeah. Christy says what it feels like to work here. Kimberly says the environment created by employees and managers. Yeah, the way it feels and the expectations. Excellent, Marianne. Mike, yeah, workplace behaviors and attitudes. Hey, how are we conducting ourselves? Love it. Shared values and beliefs. Ooh, yeah, that's a good one there. The environment your team functions in. Exactly. So y'all are spot on in how you're defining workplace culture. I found a simple sort of phrase that kind of stuck out and resonated to me, so I'll add that to what you all are putting in the chat there. But that shared practices and beliefs that determine how we do things here. That's a workplace culture. It's that environment, that ecosystem. Each one of us are actively contributing to this live culture with what we do, with how we do it, how we talk and communicate with one another, how we hold ourselves accountable, and how we talk about accountability in the workplace. So that must mean then we talked about accountability, we talked about workplace culture. That must mean that a culture of accountability encompasses a workplace environment where individuals and the teams consistently, emphasize that word consistently, take ownership of their behaviors, their decisions, the results that are generated. And here's an interesting add-on to this, viewing mistakes as learning opportunities rather than reasons for blame. And that's going to be big as we dive deeper into today's conversation. But that culture of accountability that we strive for, And again, that consistency is going to be key. This isn't something like, oh, yep, we have an accountable culture here. We're good. We don't got to worry about anything. Because whether somebody's been here for many years and many decades, or somebody is new to the team, we are all actively contributing to this culture of accountability. And what we say, how we say it, what we do or don't do, and how we own the many responsibilities that we have and our areas that we touch through our role here at the city and the county. So to keep us rolling here, going back to the chat function, if you have experienced a workplace with a strong sense of accountability, in the chat, I want you to type out what made you feel like there was strong accountability there in that workplace. We don't need names, we don't need identifiers, but what made you feel like there was a strong sense of accountability there in that workplace? We'll hold a few moments of time for you to type out your responses. And what made you feel like there was strong accountability there in that workplace? All right, we see some answers coming through the chat there. Heard the phrase, I'll take the blame to help us move forward. Oh, so somebody taking ownership over something that may have been a misstep. All staff were held to the same rules and standards. Ooh, that consistency. Okay. Management led by example. Ability and willingness to admit mistakes and make corrections and then move on, move forward. Everyone was on the same page, called out anyone who wasn't there, right? So getting us all together, focused on the direction that we need to go as a team. Yeah, the agency and teams within the agencies all had goals and objectives, that clarity. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Ooh, Christina brings up an excellent point here. Healthy monthly conversations regarding goals, timelines, obstacles, and wins. So that sounds like some sort of a mechanism there to check in, to ensure progress is being made, or if anyone has questions or is unclear, there's a way to bring everybody up to speed. Love that. Supportive manager, isn't that so important to have the support and the good faith of a manager or supervisor? Open communication. Yep, we're going to come back to that one because that's going to be real big. Yeah. Oh, Meg says follow up from supervisors when an individual did not complete something they were responsible for. Yep, that can sometimes feel a little scary, a little intimidating, especially, both ends really of that interaction. We'll talk about that here in a second, but that follow up is such an important thing to uplift. Excellent. Keep the thoughts coming, everybody. So that's when there's strong accountability in the workplace, those are some of the behaviors, the approaches, the strategies that have made you feel like, hey, there's a good, strong sense of accountability on my team. Well, let's flip the script here. And if you've ever experienced a workplace with low or no accountability, again, we don't need names or identifiers, but what we really want to know is what made you feel like there was low accountability there in that workplace. Again, in the chat function, go ahead and type out some responses. What happens when there's low accountability in that workplace? All right, we got some answers coming through. So when there's low and no accountability, let's see. They ask for input, leaders ask for input, but completely disregard what was said. Ooh, that's an important thing. Resentment, that sense of resentment. Others taking credit for your work and ideas. No one taking responsibility. Timelines not being met. The blame game, Diana. Yeah, the blame game. Good one to uplift. Management playing favorites, have high turnover, lack of policies and procedures. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing. Nobody's really focused on that same sort of united approach. No follow-up, no follow-through, low morale. Yeah, no, that's definitely happens when there's low to no accountability in the ecosystem at work, right? Leadership changes, expectations, so there's not that consistency and that clarity. Okay, without explanation, appears to hold different employees to different standards. Oof, yeah. Doesn't communicate growth areas in a timely manner. Things might be just kind of left fluttering in the wind. Oh yeah, no, very insightful things that you all are sharing in the chat. If anything else comes to your mind, please feel free to add that to the chat. So we talked about when there's strong accountability. We talked about when there's low or no accountability. And to really hit this point home, I want to talk about why strive for strengthening that culture of accountability. I know some of it may seem obvious at times, but this is important stuff. So we really want to hit this home. We can increase the performance of the team, increase each individual's contribution. Do they have what they need? Are they being given the check-ins and the support to be able to move things forward and successfully complete whatever their task requires? Increase the sense of trust between teammates, trust with teammates and leadership, so that way we can communicate effectively. We can exchange feedback and have that trust that whatever's being said, whatever's being done is being done, so that way we can drive forward whatever our work is requiring us to do. Increase that sense of collaboration so we can work with one another, and we can, yes, have feedback, we can have pushback when necessary to ultimately arrive where we need to go to make progress on what we're doing. I don't know if y'all have ever been in a situation where you have a tough project, tough problem to solve, and sometimes it feels like you're spinning your wheels and you can't collaborate effectively. Well, that's where this comes in. We really need to have that culture of accountability to strengthen the way that we can collaborate with one another. So when we have a culture of accountability, that does then foster, and some of you have reflected on this in the chat, that fosters transparent goals, clear expectations, clear destination of where we need to go. How are we going to get there? Open communication. It's not just negative, heavy stuff, but there's open communication, there's clear communication, there's feedback, there's recognition. Okay, so that open sense of communication, so you can address whatever needs to be addressed, right then and there, and not let things fester and snowball and become bigger issues or bigger distractions later on in your process. And then that shared ownership of success. There's something to be said when you know that each one of your teammates is locked into knowing that we all have ownership over this. We all feel like this is important to us. This matters. How we do this, how we complete this matters. We take pride in that. We have stakes, skin in the game. This is something that we each have a piece of, and we own that. So we strive for that culture of accountability, and there's many benefits that come with that. So where does accountability begin? Well, I would wager to say inside each and every one of us. To kind of give you an example of what I mean by that, and I want to open up the book here and give you a quick little story. I promise it's short. But, at work, there was a particular season that things were pretty chaotic. A lot of different projects I was trying to balance. I was really trying to stay on top of things, but I was struggling. So I was getting, high stress, maybe feeling a little burnt out. But there was a particular presentation that I had to give. And for whatever reason, with all the different stuff happening and demands on my time, that presentation started to get pushed back and further down on my to-do list. Well, enough time passed, and I had to deliver that presentation. So I did what many professionals do in that scenario. I kind of hurried up and cobbled something together, put this presentation together, and then the time came and I gave that presentation. Well, turns out that presentation it was fine. It was okay. You know, you know, meh, satisfied what it needed to do and move on. Well, my busy season, busy frame of mind, I then jumped to the next project, full speed ahead towards that. And I had a supervisor who did have a check-in with me, and they sat me down and we started to debrief and reflect on that presentation that I had given. And they said, RJ, I've seen you do better. I've seen you add so much more. And I'm just here to ask, is this low priority for you? Was this a low priority? Was this something that, does it matter to you? And I don't know about you all, but I internally responded, I'm like, oh, how dare you? Of course this matters. So my defenses went up, right? And I was like, how dare you? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized they were right. I mean, I could have prepared a little bit better. I could have managed my time a little better on the front end there to not be scrambling at the end. And yes, it was a busy season, so I can give myself grace for that. And they gave me grace too for that. So don't want to come off like they didn't. But they also were willing to kind of slow things down and ask with me and hold me accountable for what I had produced. And so believe you me, the next time that I had to give a presentation to that group, I was on it. I was putting things together early. In my mind, my competitive self, I'm like, I'm gonna hit a home run with this one. And it worked out well in that particular scenario. But again, that all kind of emphasizes on the inside here, we can respond to accountability a couple different ways, but that doesn't mean it's always easy. Doesn't mean it's kind of the natural reaction is to say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do better. No, it's sometimes it invokes a response. It invokes emotion. Sometimes we get our defenses up because nobody likes to necessarily, be shown a time that they didn't do their best. So to kind of get us thinking here, and again, you all and the expertise that you bring, have you ever held yourself accountable at work when it wasn't easy? And what I really want to hear in the chat function there, if there's any sort of quick nugget that you can share about, how did you grow from it? What was kind of your takeaway? What was your growth from when you held yourself accountable in a scenario where it wasn't easy? I'll give you a few moments to type out a response to how did you grow from it? Hold yourself accountable at work when it wasn't easy. How did you grow from it? In the chat there, Hannah shares that she learned what was necessary to succeed and have different outcomes in the future, better planning and collaboration. Love it. Learn to do a better job prioritizing tasks. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Meg says it made me more motivated to do better in the future. Angel says I became more knowledgeable and resourceful. Kimberly shares about a situation, let it go on too long, learn that it's better to face tough stuff earlier, not let it sit there and fester and grow and just linger. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Diana says learning how to ask for help. That's big. That's something I struggle with too, is sometimes, it for whatever reason, I hesitate to ask for help, or I have in the past. I've been actively working on this, but you know, it takes time and it takes intentionality. Buckling down, really working hard on the next projects. Yep. Taking ownership, while you may appear, you know, not well trained, it confirms that I care that I do it right. Yep, that ownership, that sense of wanting to do a good job. And I think that's what we all want, right? We want to be able to carry out our service in a good way and have pride in that. Becky shares, anytime I've made an error, I've found a way to make sure it gets done in the future. You course correct, you make sure it gets done. Love that. And yep, incredibly large number of reminders on my calendar. That resonates with me. If it's not on my calendar, then it doesn't exist. So I need to set reminders for myself too. I love that. So, oh yeah, Christina says time blocking, giving myself internal deadlines, follow up, consistent communication, adapt, adjust, overcome, obstacles will happen. That is spot on. Because like it or not, and try to control it as well as we can, the fact is adversity comes up, unexpected things come up, and we have to try to create certain, even if it's a small reminder, even if it's blocking out a little bit of time, to really help keep ourselves accountable and drive forward what we need to do. Love that. If anyone else is still typing, please keep your responses coming. Lots of important insights that you all are sharing. So one thing that I want to kind of focus on is just that slowing down element. Because yes, at work, you know, we're local government, we have a variety of services and a variety of situations happen to and around us. But sometimes we need to slow down and really think about accountability and reflect on, you know, how is this currently present, or maybe there's gaps in how I am holding myself accountable. So accountability can improve when we pause and self-assess every now and then. Doesn't have to be, you know, all the time, every single moment, but again, setting up that time block or those reminders to kind of just slow down and reflect on the sense of accountability that you may be modeling, showing, living there at work. So to kind of get us going here with this self-reflection, I want to have us all, and we'll utilize a poll function that I'll launch here in a second, but I want us to think about this from the lens of personal accountability. I'm going to demonstrate or place a prompt or a statement on this poll, and then I want you to rate yourself on that. How frequently or how often is that in fact the case? So it could be anywhere from 1, which is never, could be 5, which is always. So to kind of get us going here, I'll launch the first one, and let me know if you have any issues seeing it once I get it launched. Okay. So the first poll question, and again, no names are shared on this, but the totality of the results are. But the prompt is, I actively seek out feedback from others. I actively seek feedback out from others. Do you do that never, rarely, sometimes, usually, or always? Again, no names are recorded, but I want to hear from you all. All right, looks like usually is always, sometimes is starting to creep up a little. Sitting at around 75% or so, or the usually, I actively seek out feedback from others. And yeah, if you're still working on the poll, please feel free to select your response as you can. But seeking out that feedback from others. So in the chat, and to add to this, to expand on this, what happens then on a team setting here when there is that open and constructive feedback? Like what happens then? What's the result, or what can result when there's that open constructive feedback? Type out a response in the chat there. I want to hear from you all. Give you a few moments to type that out. But what happens on a team when there's open constructive feedback? Achieve better results, buy-in from most staff, progress, yep, greater productivity, achievement, improvement, new ideas, yep, things get better, love it. Learning, oh yeah, exactly. Brainstorm more ideas brought to the table. It's amazing what happens once we expand the table and more ideas come through and we can arrive at some maybe newer things that we weren't even thinking about. I can see things from a new perspective. I can correct a mistake before going live. I get affirmation. Yep. Learn stuff you never thought before. Build a team that begins to trust each other. Oh, yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Y'all are on it today. Well, continuing on with this personal accountability, I want to pose the next prompt to you. Let me get that going here. So, launching the poll, and the question is, I own my results and outcomes. So rate yourself if you own your results and your outcomes. 1 through 5. How often do you own results and outcomes? All right, let's see how the poll is looking. Okay, so the 4s are sitting at 30%, 32%. 5s are going strong. I own my stuff, right? I own my results. I own my outcomes. Very good. So yeah, sitting around a 70 to 30% or so difference there, 4s and 5s. That's excellent to see. But again, it's not easy stuff, right? It's not always easy unless you really work at it, but it can also feel scary. For those of you who are willing to maybe share a little bit of vulnerability here, why can this feel scary to own your results, to own your outcomes? Why should this even feel scary at all? Type out a quick thought in the chat there if anyone has something, whether it's a feeling you've experienced or maybe a colleague, but why can it feel a little scary sometimes to own your results and own the outcomes? It's hard to admit it, but if you're thinking about not just yourself and your team, you understand the importance of being honest. Yep. It's a bummer when the result wasn't what I wanted. That's right, Christy. It does require vulnerability. Yep. Diana, yep. Uncertainty, how can it affect you, your job, your reputation, your credibility. You have to be willing to admit mistakes. Yep. Being able to own your stuff, but also be able to even say it out loud, right? Hey, I think someone said it earlier too, right? I accept the blame for this. I own this particular misstep, and this is how we can, work to correct it. Yep, it can be very hard when you're overworked and too much on your plate. That's a good call out, Brent. Yep, fear of judgment, Becca. You're spot on. Nobody wants to be perceived as, anything other than awesome, right? So definitely, definitely. Ooh, Leslie, dropping some knowledge there. A coach told me once, fail stands for first attempt in learning. Love that one. Yeah, excellent. Y'all are bringing some great insight to today's session. All right, the next one here. I'll launch that poll for you, and I can reverse my negative thoughts and feelings. So that should pop up here. There it goes. So go ahead and rate yourself. This is a tough one, at least I'll speak personally for myself. I can reverse my negative thoughts and feelings. Go ahead and rate yourself 1 through 5. The 3s are going strong here. Sometimes I can reverse my negative thoughts and feelings. Usually is the next one, the 4 category there, sitting at about 30%. Few 5s. to always. I always do a good job of reversing my negative thoughts. Okay. Yeah, this isn't easy stuff, right? This can be tough. And so in reversing my negative thoughts and feelings, how could this then impact your team? Does it impact your team? I mean, I'm talking about you yourself, the individual, right? I reverse my negative thoughts and feelings. How does that impact the team? Kimberly sharing a good thought there. After many years, city employment gets difficult to expect improvements when it's been promised so many times in the past but not delivered. So when we talk about like a certain, almost like a cycle, right? Sometimes there's energy going towards change, trying to maybe raise the standard, and you know what? Maybe things don't happen and it goes back down. So it's kind of the ebb and flow, right? The peak and valley, but it's not changing, right? So that's something we want to come back to here at the tail end. You bring up a good point. But reversing my negative thoughts and feelings, how could this impact your team? In the chat function, anyone have a thought? Or does this impact the team? Because if I'm not reversing my negative thoughts and feelings, what can potentially happen? Negativity can infect those around you, lower morale. Yep, communication. Anna says, I think of being a positive potato, helping see a way through. Excellent. A light, ability to pick ourselves up. Wonderful. Yeah, Colleen, it can limit growth, right? The negativity can influence others. To Becca's point, you want to be approachable. That's right. Go a long way in office morale. Diana, yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah. So it can be hard. There's other factors, external factors, budgets and employees. Exactly. Moving on, improving a setback improves morale. It's contagious. Yeah, Meg, you're spot on. All right, y'all. Last one here. And keep the thoughts coming in the chat there. But the last poll question that I'm going to launch for you is one that I found very interesting for us as local government. And there it goes. I know what motivates me, and I create ways to keep myself motivated. Go ahead and throw a rating there for yourself, 1 through 5. I know what motivates me, and I create ways to keep myself motivated. The usually is pretty strong there at about 90%. Usually do a good job of knowing what motivates me, how to kind of get that energy and that focus going. And if not, I can create ways to keep myself producing, keep myself locked in. Yep, exactly. So kind of in the lens here of us as local government, how can complacency affect us? Does it affect us? I can tell you what, I had a preconceived notion of what it would be like to work in local government before I joined a couple of years ago, working with the city and the county. I'm very pleased to learn otherwise, but how can complacency affect us? Affects any workplace. What about us in local government? Throw out a few thoughts there in the chat. Complacency. How can that affect us? Yeah, lack of productivity, innovation, yep. Ooh, complacency could cause things to slip through the cracks. Ain't that something? Yep, stop looking for ways to be more efficient and effective. That's right, because as local government, we provide a variety of important services to all residents of our ever-changing community, right? And if we are being stuck in a certain way and not addressing the changes or the gaps that might come up, then that really does put us at risk of not being able to provide that service to different residents who are facing certain barriers. So yeah, no, definitely. Creativity, yep, I love that. And ability to effectively serve our communities, exactly. Service to public could decline. We don't want to see that. So yeah, I think y'all are spot on, and I know we got about 15 minutes left. I want to do a couple more things with you before the end of the hour. But I really want to emphasize here, the framing matters when we talk about accountability. Sometimes accountability can be portrayed as a punishment, right? Oh, they're holding me accountable. Oh, whose fault is this? It's that person, it's Christy. She's the one, and I blame her. It becomes backward looking. It becomes defensive. Everybody gets, defensive and not at ease. You kind of lose some of that trust, and it's very rooted in fear, right? Who wants to be the villain here? Who's the bad person? So when accountability is thought of as a punishment, that can teach people to try to cover their tracks and hide their mistakes instead of trying to work to actively improve things, right? Teaches them to avoid risk. Why try something new? Why get creative and come up with a different approach? Protect themselves rather than the organization. That's where it becomes about me, and I don't want to look bad. And if I have to throw someone else or throw the team or throw even the organization under the bus, that's not good for anyone. Spend more time explaining the error than fixing the root cause. Someone talked about the blame game. You ever play the blame game and it says, well, not my fault, it's so-and-so, and they point to someone else. And next thing you know, more time and focus and attention is being spent on who's the villain here, who's the person at fault, instead of what's the solution, what's the lesson that we're learning, how are we going to change this outcome in the future. So definitely that framing matters, and really want to flip that mindset of accountability as punishment, flip it to accountability as growth. It's an opportunity. So we can instill accountability as a way to actively learn, actively improve. It's a growing opportunity. It's kind of like a muscle, right? For those of you who like to lift weights, for example, there's that resistance. It's a heavy weight, but with that practice, with that repetition, when you change up your workout style, the result is your body gets stronger, right? The muscles get stronger and more effective. So kind of like with accountability, when we can be intentional with trying to keep practicing, keep incorporating even the small things, even the calendar reminders, those sorts of things, that can really just help keep that momentum growing. And so a way to kind of help us with framing accountability as a growth opportunity are a couple questions that can help us ask ourselves where we're at with accountability. One question that I want to emphasize, what was the expectation? And you all spoke to this in the chat, getting clear on what was the expectation? What were we trying to do? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to solve? What are we trying to achieve? Ownership. What did I own in this outcome? Like call it out, say it out loud, right? What did I own in this outcome? What can I learn from this? What's the learning opportunity here? What didn't we know at the time that now we do and can then ensure this doesn't happen again? How can I improve for next time? What's that adjustment? What's that tweak we can do? Or who can we bring in to help us learn to make sure we avoid this circumstance in the future? So again, the framing is important when we talk about accountability. It is not punishment, but it is a growth opportunity. But yeah, sure, that all sounds great, right? Accountability, good. Yep, it's not rocket science. The reality is the conditions at work are not always ideal. The reality is the teams that we work on and the teammates and their approaches to things might not always be the most accountable. I was attending a training earlier this week, and a quote stuck out to me that I wanted to share with you all today. People are comfortable in their patterns of behavior. And that hit me because I'm like, wait a second, that makes sense. We have our lived experiences. We have the different things that shape us, how we operate, how we perceive the world around us. And at work, that means how we approach our work, how we conduct ourselves. And that lived experience can shape my sense of how I come off as being accountable or not. in the workplace. So then that begets the question here of how can we strengthen accountability at work, even when it isn't easy, even when it's that uphill battle, even when maybe some teammates, maybe some supervisors, maybe some leaders are not modeling or exhibiting the accountability that we would like to see. That happens in any workplace, right? And we, as local government, are uniquely positioned to have a couple external factors that can also impact some of that too. So to kind of get us rolling with that, how can we begin to move the needle? How can we begin to achieve progress in increasing accountability in our teams and in our workplaces and with ourselves especially? We've come up with a couple keys to strengthening accountability. This one you all have mentioned in the chat, but I really want to hit this one home. Getting really clear. What does success look like? So in other words, we can't solve all problems entirely and forever. Things change, things shift. The circumstances might change. We might not know all the information and be required to act on something. We can define, though, the outcome. We can't solve the problem entirely. How can we try to arrive at a reasonable outcome that can shift things in a positive direction? Is there a timeline? Are we talking about a timeline? Are we creating those check-ins, those reminders that will help keep us on track because there's so many other things happening around us? Who are we involving? Are we inviting others to share their perspective, their proximity to whatever our project is? And then how we drive things forward. Are we being very clear on keeping the ball rolling or letting this project linger in the wind until I have to hurry up and try to do something before the end of Q2? Okay, so getting really clear on what are those measures of success, those metrics that will take us to where we need to go.
RJ, I love how you positioned that because, one of the things that we often think of from an accountability standpoint is like, what do leaders need to do to help people be accountable? And that's very true, but it's also in our hands, right? Like we can ask questions. So if something isn't clear, then our part of accountability is asking questions, asking for more information, looking for the information that we need so that we know what success looks like, and then also moving ourselves forward by creating our own timeline to keep ourselves on track. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Exactly. Yeah, it's what can we do from our role, where we're at, and how can we communicate with leaders and other stakeholders about that? Second key I want to reference here is the follow-up and the follow-through, and that is crucial, right? Showing your commitment. Yes, we're all busy. We all have a lot of demands. I mean, that includes leadership too. They have a lot of different things that takes their time and capacity. But each one of us can show that commitment. We can follow through. We can circle back with somebody, even if we don't have the answer at that time. To circle back with somebody and say, "Hey, I'm working on this. I haven't found it out yet, but I want to try to get this done by the end of the week." Something like that, so folks are not just there floating in the wind, wondering, well, maybe they forgot, but maintaining that communication, those progress updates, blocking time to check in with one another, to follow up and follow through. That's going to be key, because when somebody doesn't follow up, when you have an ask and you know what, it never gets done and they never talk about it, that will start to erode trust. That will raise suspicion. So I can't stress it enough there for accountability, following up and following through. Making accountability contagious. I know this also came up in our chat, but kind of the infectiousness of what we're doing and how we're doing it, making it contagious. I mean, with all respect to our friends at the health department here, but this is something that's contagious for a good way, right? What we do and how we act at work, others tend to pick up on that. How many times have you ever seen somebody do or say something at work and you borrow or you steal that And that's the thing that you start to implement, right? So that work culture is alive. We're all actively contributing to this. And when we can model that, when we can show and communicate and conduct ourselves in an accountable way, even if everyone else on the team and the ecosystem isn't there yet, maybe there is somebody there who sees that and will respond to that and start to incorporate that into their performance. So again, we can't control everybody. We can't control leaders. We can't control, electeds. We can't control directors. We can't control supervisors. But we can control ourselves, and we can try to be that source of accountability that others can draw from. Consistency is crucial. Again, you all have talked about that, having that consistency and even transparency is connected to that. But like a muscle, the more we conduct ourselves in an accountable way, the more natural it feels. And our credibility, our reputation is at stake here. Us as individuals, can I be a teammate that can be accountable? Somebody can count on me to deliver. Is my team going to be viewed as one that is credible and has a good reputation for delivering what needs to be done? And then, of course, our credibility and reputation, not only to our leaders, but to the residents of our community. Are we as local government, are we strengthening the credibility and reputation of the work that we do? And then the last key, practicing and preparing for some of the tougher conversations. So yes, we don't make assumptions. We don't, try to say label them as like just, oh, they're a bad worker, or that's just how they are. We don't make those assumptions, but we do prepare for when we have to address things, when we have to talk about accountability, and something that's a little tougher. Are we preparing constructive feedback? So we're not just calling them out and putting them on blast, but having a constructive, solution-oriented conversation with them. Are we also offering recognition and uplifting them when they do things in a great way, in a strong way, and recognizing that? So again, the practice and the preparation for the tougher elements of conversation is going to be really key to strengthening the sense of accountability there in the workplace. So there's many more keys to that, but I know we're running short on time, so I kind of want to wrap things up before I tackle a couple housekeeping things. But you all have alluded to this in your responses in the chat. Sometimes those small changes that we do can cause a larger ripple or impact on our teams. If you start modeling some different reminders, then I might see that and be like, oh, I want to do that too. And then that starts to help me out. And so these small shifts that we can do, even if they don't change the entire sense of accountability on the team, overnight, they can slowly have that ripple effect. And second point, be that teammate. If you've ever worked with somebody that you view them as highly accountable, you see what they do, you see how they are intentional with circling back, with following up, with being constructive in their feedback, try to be that teammate. Try to make those behaviors, those responses, something that you start to incorporate, because we are all in this together. We are a large workforce. We're a large team. We have so many diverse roles here at the city and county, but each one of us contributes to this culture of accountability. And so definitely want to lean on one another, learn from one another, and together we can strengthen things. If you have any final questions or comments, throw them in the